What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Scorching Hot Podcast. I am your host, Dylan Delaney, and I am joined, as always, by my guest, Dave Furtado. And how are we doing on the first day of June?
We're still here.
We are still here, but
We're still here.
we're surviving. But we all know what June brings. We all know what June brings. It's gonna be a better month because Flight's gonna take over. Flight is here, and he's here to dominate the league. Speaking of the league, we're going to talk some basketball today because it looks like that the NBA is nearing its comeback. Owners, players have been kind of discussing and seeing what's best for the league, where they're going to play. Looks like Orlando is a destination that all the teams are going to go to. So right now it seems like it's between two different formats. We got the 22-team format and the 30-team format. I'll have you go right away because I think you know a little bit more about the formats than I do. Is there really, because I know that with the 22-team format, it's everybody that's about 6 games out of the playoff contention won't be invited, so that's why it's the 22. I'm not missing anything else, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. So basically, I'd be shocked if they bring all 30 teams back. I just don't think that's going to happen. The one that I saw that intrigued me the most was the 20-team format. They do basically run it like FIBA and do like a group stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think honestly, that's a pretty good way to do it. You're bringing 20 teams back, so you're basically getting 4, that otherwise wouldn't have made the playoffs. So you can now, whether they do that conference based or not, you're bringing 4 teams that wouldn't have otherwise made the playoffs. So that log jam at the bottom of the Western Conference can kind of sort itself out in that group stage.
Mm-hmm.
And basically they'd go, so top 2 teams from each group, whether it's 4 groups of 5 teams or 5 groups of 4 teams. You would, top 2 teams from each group move on to like a more traditional best of 7 series type playoff.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's honestly the best scenario. I don't know if that's the one they're going to go with, but I think it's the easiest one to put in place, other than just straight to playoffs, 16 team. As you would have done, just cancel the rest of the regular season like hockey's doing.
Is hockey canceling their entire season or no?
So they canceled the rest of the regular season,
but they're
going straight to playoffs.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought.
With increased numbers of teams, so it's like a 24 team playoff or something like that. Then like a round robin for like the top seeds in each conference.
Okay, because I haven't really heard a whole lot of what hockey's doing. Maybe I also don't follow it as closely as I do basketball, but
they're playing. They're just not doing the rest of the regular season.
I was gonna say if they don't even play at all, Bruins are the champions, and that's all fine by me. They could keep that.
Now they have to play in a round. They won the President's Trophy for the best record in the league, and now they have to play a round robin for the top seed in the playoffs.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, with the NBA, so if it's this scenario, then they're basically going to eliminate like the traditional 16-team playoff format. It'll probably be reduced down to about 10 if it's the top 2 teams of every.
So you're looking at top 2 teams from each group. So yeah, it would be
anywhere from 10 to 12, probably
8 to 10 teams.
They could do that. I could say if they wanted to cut it down to 12, they could probably do that too.
Yeah, I mean
12 would probably be easier to divide up as well.
Yeah, basically you're just, instead of doing, the first round of the playoffs, you're doing a group stage where you play everybody in your group. I think it's twice.
It'd be interesting too to see how they divide these groups up as well. Because if they're playing in their groups, are you gonna keep it separated as East versus West still, or what?
That's definitely interesting. I think doing East versus West would make the most sense.
Right.
Just to kind of keep some sense of normalcy.
Right, and if you're adding another East team, because with the way the format would be right now, you have 13 teams in the West that would probably be attending because it's the top 8 plus Portland, New Orleans, Sacramento, Phoenix, and who's the last one I'm missing? San Antonio. San Antonio would be there too, and then in the East it's just Washington that gets invited, which
it saves. I could see if they wanted to do conferences, maybe do you're 8 and you're 8. And that's 16, and then do +2 in each conference, and there's your extra 4.
Mm-hmm.
So do, the 8 and 9 in the West, and then the 8 and 9 in the East. I mean, the 9 and the 10 in the West, and the 9 and 10 in the East.
Right. But hey, if Phoenix gets invited, I'm all for it. Either way, as long as I get some Suns basketball, because I know my team's probably not making the playoffs, but if I get some Suns basketball, I'm content.
I just want to find a way to go back to playing basketball and not have to watch Boston Philly first round.
Yeah, they were saying that it's if the they keep like the 16 team format, but if they like got rid of the conferences, they just took the best 16 teams. It would still be the Jazz and the Rockets facing off in the first round for like the third or fourth straight year,
Yeah,
based off the records
and
right
I
now.
think regardless of what they do,
Boston.
you're getting Boston Philly first round too.
Which always a spicy matchup, so that wouldn't be too bad.
No, it's a great series. I'd love to see it again. I just would rather see it in like the second round of the conference final.
It's very interesting that we've had this long of a hiatus, and it's picking up. I'm assuming it sounds like they're gonna do like the training camp, and we could probably see a resume date around like the end of June, early July for basketball, and there's a lot of different factors that can go into it because a lot of these players are going to be so much more healthier now. But there's also still players that, like Joe Ingles was saying, he doesn't want to play. So that could lead to other players like stepping up and taking a big role and making a bigger name for themselves, or other players that were previously hurt, like maybe a guy like John Wall who's ready to come back and play, and maybe he goes out, carries the Wizards to the playoffs, and all of a sudden they're a playoff contender. So
yeah, it's definitely interesting. And I mean, you also look at the side of it. It's like who's coming back and what kind of shape, because you have the people coming back injury free. That's going to help a lot of teams, but you're also looking at players that I'm looking at you, Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid, who are liable to come back in awful shape, and they're going to need a little bit to get their legs back underneath them and kind of figure things out, get back in shape.
Jokic,
so you're wondering, what teams that's going to hurt and what teams that's going to help that layoff.
So Jokic looks like a completely different person.
Right? I did say that, but Jokic, that picture came out the other day. He does look pretty good.
Jokic looks completely different. That's what I was saying. Like, he looks more like Juan Hernan-Gomez than Nikola Jokic right now.
Yeah, for sure.
That's wild. That's wild. I'm interested to see how this all plays out because, I mean, as far as a 30-team format goes, I don't think it makes sense for a team like the Warriors or the Hawks to come back and play.
Yeah, and I don't think they will. I know Michael Jordan said that the other day. He was like, why am I going to put my guys, in potential danger when we got no shot at playing in anything this year?
Yeah, I was looking at what Zach Lowe, his article was saying, and he was in his article, Atlanta was really pushing for a return. But in my head, I'm like, why would they? They're near dead last in the conference right now. They're not really playing for anything other than a lottery spot at this point. They're not, they're not
really just want that lottery spot.
Yeah, exactly. What are they going to do?
Lose a few more games.
Yeah, just go out and boom! Oh, we got the number 1 pick again. Oh, sweet! Now we can draft another guard or a big man to put up with Trae Young. But I mean, it makes more sense to include like your teams that are in still playoff contention, and I still feel like it's unfair to Memphis because Memphis rightfully so has earned that 8 seed. Especially with the expectations that were carried for them into the season. They're kind of getting gypped, in my opinion, here. But at the same time, I also don't think it's fair to count on a team like Portland, who, if we remember back a couple months ago, got screwed out of a game against Utah. And that's got that ripple effect to now they're all the way down in like 10th or 11th in the conference. So like I think it's a mix of just unfair and fair. I don't know how to really explain it, but it's like a mix, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's not fair for anybody. Fairness has kind of been thrown out the window. Like, whatever plan they decide to run with, somebody's going to get screwed.
Yeah, and at this point, it's almost just like too bad.
You kind of have to try and find that plan that's going to screw the least amount of people. So, if it's only screwing, 1 or 2 teams as opposed to 5 or 6, you're just going to have to go with that 1 or 2 teams and, tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at this point, it's just like too bad, so sad. You got to do this, you got to go on somehow. We need basketball back.
Yeah, and I mean the NBA is just kind of. This has been a rough year for them.
Yeah, it's been.
They started the year off losing a ton of money over in China.
Right.
And then they get this, and This is almost they're at a point where they almost can't afford to not go back.
Right, but they're not.
It's gonna screw with the salary. It's already screwing with the salary cap, but it's gonna absolutely tank it.
Right. Yeah, but it's not. At least it's not doing what baseball's doing, though.
Yeah, because I think the players and the owners, there's a little bit of trust there.
For them, yeah, I'd say in most situations there's a good amount of trust. But
Adam Silver's a competent commissioner.
Yeah, but whereas in baseball you have
Rob Manfred is the worst commissioner in sports. It's really not even close.
You could just call him Manfred at this point.
It's awful. He's absolutely awful.
Yeah, he makes Roger Goodell look like a genius. Which
Yeah, no, he really does.
I can't believe. Also, a little bit off topic. I can't believe Roger Goodell did the boy Prez dirty.
Oh, I'm honestly, I'm so not surprised that he did that, but like, I'm
Coward.
surprised he did at the same time.
I'm not surprised, right? It's
Like,
just
I'm not surprised at all that he's backing out of that, but like,
it's still pathetic. It's still
oh
pathetic.
my god. I mean, if I were Portnoy, I would throw a party on the same night
Oh yeah, that's what he's planning on doing, isn't he?
and broadcast it live.
Oh yeah,
Maybe, depending on what the whole situation is with different states and where he wants to have it.
right.
The
Who knows?
shelter in place stuff.
Who knows what travel?
Maybe like sell tickets to it. Just donate all the money to the charity you were going to donate it to anyway.
Because who knows what travel and gatherings are going to be like in October and whatnot. You know,
Honestly though, if I were Prez, I'd throw it, like Barstool, like party with Prez, and throw a giant ass party on that same night.
that would be
To go
legendary.
watch Monday Night Football, and any money you make out of that, just give it to that same charity.
That'd be legendary. I'd be all for that. That'd be great.
That's to quote Portnoy, that's for the kids.
It's for the kids.
He's about the kids.
He's for the kids. Yeah, see, but what you were saying with the NBA, it also counting Kobe's death, like it's been one of the craziest years in the NBA to remember. I mean, to cap it all off, you got literally a game gets postponed because of coronavirus, and then all of a sudden your season just gets suspended like on the spot. Like that's
that's
it's
nuts.
absurd. It's absurd. It's going down in the history books. Also at the same time you had a lot of positive moments. Like the All-Star game this year was the best All-Star game I've ever seen. Like that, the way with how competitive that was, and that's the thing. Because if you bring these playoffs back in, the playoffs are something that could save like the season. That's gonna save everything. Because I feel like a lot of the players are gonna come back just so hungry and wanting to play that we could see like that type of level of intensity throughout the entire course of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think when they come back, you might have maybe 3 or 4 games where they're just kind of going through it, trying to get back into it. But I mean, they'll
Aside
flip
from
that
that,
switch, and it's going to be crazy. So it'll be really fun to watch if they're able to come back.
yeah, especially if you got your players going through training camps and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure every team's open up right now, or like not.
Yeah, just about. The Celtics were one of the last ones to get the go ahead.
Yeah, the Celtics are all set now, and I think there might have been 1 or 2 that still weren't letting them open up, but I think they lifted them up. I'm pretty sure the Knicks were like one of the ones that weren't letting them open. But I think they're good now.
I know New York did it before Massachusetts did it to give them clearance to use their facilities.
To be fair, New York has
just
been
by
hit the hardest.
a few days.
Yeah.
So I think everybody's back.
Yeah, to be fair, New York has been hit the hardest among the entire population of the United States as far as coronavirus goes. New York.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Massachusetts has been pretty bad, but New York, there's nothing that really compares to what's going on in New York City because it's absolutely treacherous.
Just a sheer number of people.
Yeah, exactly. But it's definitely from what the talks have escalated to. It definitely seems like it's a good sign. I think they're gonna make the vote on Thursday. I want to say. I think that's when they said that's the final vote.
Yeah, I think it's coming this week.
And it sounds like from right now what we're hearing for reports is, most of the owners are on board, so we're probably going to get a majority vote in bringing the season back and playing out the playoffs and everything like that. But yeah, with everything that's going on in the world right now, obviously, anything to get an escape from what's going on and to kind of like clear your mind. And
I'll take it.
At this point.
I'll take it, no question.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like when in times like this, some people look to sports as like a refuge almost. It's kind of like escape, and obviously with a pandemic that's going on, the only sport that we can rely on right now is NASCAR, and I don't really feel like watching NASCAR.
There's only so many times you can watch a guy drive in a circle.
I can't. There's only so many left turns I can take. I can only take so many left turns until I start to get dizzy. But from what that sounds like, it sounds like we got some good news on our way regarding the coming back of the NBA season. There was a little bit more NBA news that came out today. It's not very noteworthy, but it could have I would say have more of effect as the offseason goes on into next season. Jeremy Grant from the Denver Nuggets, he declined his player option. Seems like he's going to decline his player option to be an unrestricted free agent next summer. He's one of the more interesting free agent options too for next year because obviously not a very loaded class. So there's a chance that he could get a bag somewhere for a long-term deal, seeing as how thinned out this class is, as well as the same time either maybe also not getting a bag just because of how thinned out this free agent class is as well. But I know there's definitely a lot of places that could use like his type of demeanor and skill set. Atlanta's the first team that comes in my mind. I don't know. I don't know if how much you've dug into that, but I think like Atlanta and Jeremy Grant, that could be like a very good fit as far as he goes.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, with getting the bag, I don't think he'll get overpaid. Just because you did say it's a pretty weak free agent class, which I agree. But I think some teams have probably learned their lesson from 2016.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's not throw the bag at Nick Batum.
Timothy Mozgov,
Yeah, no, seriously, let's not give Timothy Mozgov
Evan Turner.
$80 million.
It's funny. All those guys are gonna be free agents too. I'm pretty sure this year. Like all those
Yeah, no, it's
2016
it's
guys.
pretty much the same class. All those 4-year guys.
Yep. Welcome back, everybody.
So yeah, but no, I haven't looked too much into like destinations for him. Could totally see Atlanta working. They could definitely use some front court help. They have some they have some interesting pieces there with Capella and then John Collins and those guys. But I don't think there's a whole lot of depth.
Yeah, and the other thing is too they got the two rookies this year too, DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish too. I at this point I'd say Cam Reddish is more of a shooting guard or small forward than anything else.
That's honestly I don't even really think of Reddish and like I don't think Grant really his role would step on Reddish's toes at all.
Right. I think and when thinking about Reddish and Hunter, I think that those two players are kind of like similar in their styles. Like DeAndre Hunter's kind of like that tweener too, where he's like 6'10", but he's not like very like built as.
I guess I don't know if it's the right way to phrase it, but he plays a little smaller than he is.
Who, DeAndre Hunter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like a little quicker.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
A little smaller and a little quicker.
Yeah.
You would expect out of a 4.
Yeah, I've been lobbying Grant to the Suns for a while because I feel like he'd be a perfect placement for a power forward on the team. That's where I don't know if Boston has the room for a Jeremy Grant, but I could definitely see, if the Suns want to throw a bag at Jeremy Grant, I would not be mad at all because I think
I think he would fit in Boston, but like you said, there's really just not a spot for him.
Yeah, then there's only a certain amount of teams that really have cap room that are entering.
Yeah, there's just like the Celtics, they're in a real interesting spot. Because like what do you do? It's so dependent on whether or not Gordon Hayward opts out.
Yeah, and how many draft picks you got?
Yeah, so I mean, if Gordon Hayward opts in for that last year, you're not doing anything.
But if you opt out, then all of a sudden you got a little bit of wiggle room.
But if he opts out, you have a little bit of room. You can either bring him back on a smaller, but longer deal. So bring him back, like another 2-3 years for less money.
Mm-hmm.
Or you just let him walk, which I wouldn't do because he's been, super under the radar, but really, really good this year.
Yeah, especially as far as like.
So I wouldn't let him dart down to Miami.
Yeah.
Which is if he leaves Boston, doesn't come back, is where I think he'll go.
To Miami, you said?
Yeah, he was down Boston, Miami the last time when he left Utah. So I could absolutely see him going to the Heat.
That'd be an interesting fit because Miami's got a similar situation. Is they got a lot of young guys and they got a lot of other players. I think if Hayward goes there, he might find himself almost in the same situation he's in Boston right now, just kind of like in a logjam, too.
Yeah, I think if he goes to Miami, honestly, I could see them having him just play point guard.
He could
just run him as a point forward.
Yeah, they could put Kendrick Nunn to the bench or something like that.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. And honestly, it would be a little bit of a logjam, but Hayward's pretty much back to where he was with Utah.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, as far as just how he looks on the court.
Yeah, it looks towards the second half, he looked a lot more just comfortable and floating a lot more natural on the court.
He started off, he was pretty good, and he's just so efficient.
That's true. Yeah, the entirety of the Celtics offense
in any role on any team.
Yeah, the entirety of the Celtics offense has been pretty efficient for the most part.
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, the Celtics are just a very efficient team for the most part. But
they could shoot the 3-ball a little better, but
other than so could basically every other team at this point. That's all the game really relies down to is just 3-pointers and inside game, and that's really about it. As long as you got mid-range game is dead. Players
sucks.
I know. Players like DeMar DeRozan and Jimmy Butler just held out to dry on offense.
Yeah, it sucks. Watching The Last Dance, just some of those, some of the highlights they were showing. Like, man, I missed like that kind of three levels of offense.
That's what makes me upset is like I have to only watch this portion of what's basketball, but I was never able to experience like the 1990s. Like I wasn't able to experience that, and I for an extent, I wasn't really a big I don't know about you, but I wasn't really a big basketball fan until about like 2000. Like I started like following basketball in like 2007, but I wouldn't consider myself like a really diehard fan until about like 2010. So I basically missed on the entire 2000s decade too.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much where I'm at too. Like the first team that like I really paid attention to was that 07-08 Celtics team.
Yeah, I'm in literally the same season, just the Suns. Like the same.
And then
same
that's
season.
from there. I just kind of started paying more and more attention as the years went on.
Exactly, and it kind of sucks because in both of those eras were so much different. With when you're 90s, you were so much more focused on just basically getting an open shot wherever, not just not taking the right shot, just taking an open shot. And defense was, I feel like defense back then, much more emphasized than it is today, as well. Because that's the thing.
Yeah, I think so. And this is just going back to kind of that point about the three different, three levels of offense. Post game, down by the basket, and the mid range and 3-point shooting. And like they look at the numbers, and you get all the people in these front offices, doing all the stats and like the sabermetric type things. Mm-hmm. And like like the 3-point shot, like that's 3 is better than 2. Like let's do that.
Right.
But then you're looking at like. That 18 to 20 footer, like that's the worst shot. That's super inefficient. Like, I mean, it is on a general scale.
But what
like,
if someone's
if you look
really,
at a player like Jimmy Butler or Gordon Hayward or somebody like that, like that's their layup.
Yeah, like that's sort of
or
people
like Chris Paul's another one.
I'd say DeRozan's almost like I feel like
DeRozan. Like you look at those players, like that 18 to 20 footer, like that's their layup.
Yeah, basically.
So like I would rather have Gordon Hayward pull up from 15 feet than take a layup.
With his history of taking layups,
yes.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Like I would rather have DeMar DeRozan pull up from 18 feet than take a layup. Like that's their layup.
I would say especially in a guy like DeMar DeRozan's case, I would rather have him take like an 18-foot mid-range jumper rather than taking a 3-pointer because that's not where he's comfortable from. He's not as comfortable from 3 as he is from a mid-range jumper standpoint. That's the thing. It doesn't kill an offense either. You know what I mean? You can work around that because the Spurs don't have the best record, but they still have a bunch of other guys on the team that can fire away from 3-point land too, and makes up for it.
It takes different skill sets to make a good team. You can't just have 15 guys who do nothing but shoot and can't get to the basket. Or can't. And sometimes that there's not going to be a lane open, and you might have to pull from 18 feet.
Yeah, I mean we're also not NBA coaches or anything like that, but watching on the TV. But just watching on the TV though, you see some players that'll just settle for a contested 3, where you could say that player could have easily made it to the free throw line without hesitation, whether it was a pull up 100%. Or you could have drove to the lane and either get the basket or a foul.
It does suck though, seeing kind of the mid range just kind of become a lost art.
Yeah, the analytics are great, but at the same time they've also kind of ruined the game as well. And that's the thing.
I wish teams would just take it on a player by player basis.
Yeah, and if anything,
the 3 is more efficient than the 2 when you're talking about the entire league, and a lot of cases that's true. Like I'd rather have Steph Curry pull from 30 feet than pull from 15.
Yeah, just because that's where he's proven that
that's his layup. Like I feel like every player has like that shot where they're making it 9 times out of 10.
For Giannis Antetokounmpo, that is 2 feet within the basket.
Yeah, no, like that is his layup. Like Ben Simmons, that is actually a layup.
Yeah, for Ben Simmons, his sweet spot is layup. For James Harden, his sweet spot is the free throw line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like James Harden, his game, get fouled, go get to the line, attack the basket, get to the stripe.
But it works.
Shoot free throws.
And it works. Like as frustrating as some of these players are, it works.
Oh, it's infuriating. I hate watching the Rockets.
Yeah,
I've made that well known on multiple podcasts and multiple articles. I hate watching the Houston Rockets play basketball. They're my least favorite team.
I kind of find it really interesting now, or I found it a little bit interesting after the deadline, where they just have no big man on their team. So like I'll probably tune in a little bit more.
The first 5 games after.
Yeah, I'm gonna tune into a little bit more of them once this whole thing comes, like once the season comes back, just to see how it's gonna fare in the playoffs when they have to play like a big team like a Denver or a Lakers or someone of that caliber.
Yeah,
But
it's
that's
gonna be
another
one
thing.
of those things. I think that if they're not shooting well, they're gonna get crushed
Oh yeah,
because they're the only strategy by running that small of a lineup all the time with
it's
no option to go
three
big
pointers.
is you're just gonna outrun people and you're gonna be too quick for the bigs to keep up.
Right,
But
right.
if you're not shooting, they can just all come off and protect the paint.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's
But
so.
you got to keep them honest, keep them closing out. Because if you're banging everything out and you can't hit a shot,
Mhm.
and Houston's done this in the playoffs before, they've missed like what was like 28 straight threes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was in that game seven was with
Yeah, so it's like this is and it's still pretty much very much the same group of guys.
yeah, give or take out Trevor Ariza and replace him with Robert Covington basically.
Yeah, it's very
You know,
much the same group. It's that
Austin
same
Rivers still there,
core.
and
Take out Chris Paul's not there anymore
and
either, but
Take out Chris Paul and replace him with Russell Westbrook, who's a worse 3 point
who's
shooter.
even more inefficient. Like at least Chris Paul can hit a shot.
Yeah, Chris Paul, he really redeemed himself this year. I'm not gonna lie.
Chris Paul's been phenomenal.
I don't understand how so many people. I mean, I for one didn't exactly write him off, but I didn't expect the performance that he would come out with this year. That man redeemed himself. He's showing why that dude is a Hall of Famer this year.
This might be like it's still probably a weird kind of hot take, but like if MVP was like truly like most valuable to your team, regardless
Chris Paul,
of how good your team is,
he'd be a top 5 candidate.
Chris Paul is the MVP.
I could make a case for
Because
that.
if you take him off of that team, they're garbage.
I think the only one other player that I can think of right now that is Giannis. Like if you take Giannis off that Milwaukee Bucks team,
oh yeah, they're not that
that team wins like 25 games.
Yeah, they're like a borderline, very very borderline playoff team in my opinion without Giannis.
Yeah, I mean you still have some solid pieces, but you take away the one arguably the most dominant.
Chris Middleton and Eric Bledsoe in the Eastern Conference is probably enough to make the playoffs.
At this point, yeah. I mean,
but like you're getting 7, 8 seed maybe.
Yeah, at this point, Bradley Beal is just missing the playoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and that's just Bradley Beal.
One good player in the East.
Exactly, and going back to what we were talking about before with like the analytics and stuff like that. If going back and watching, The Last Dance and stuff like that, and seeing some of the opponents that MJ had to face and stuff like that, and also seeing, just I'm like from going back and just watching film, just because it's kind of inspired me to go and take a look at other legends. Like the post game is completely abolished now too. Like Tim Duncan, greatest post player of all time, greatest post player of all time, Tim Duncan. But like in today's NBA, where does that fit? Because the post isn't like hardly used anymore. It's more pick and rolls, pick and fades, 3-point shots, isolation, and that's really about it.
And trust me, I love pick and roll offense. I think it's really fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But like, there's really nothing quite like watching a guy just completely dissect the defender in the post.
Oh yeah, yeah, like the like Hakeem Olajuwon used to do with the dream shake. Like that's insane.
You got Hakeem, you got Kevin McHale, even before Hakeem.
Right.
Tim Duncan.
David Robinson, just an interior beast.
You got these people that just got these, like the different post moves, great footwork in the post, just absolutely destroying people.
Yeah, because before, like, I would say before this decade, it was you need a good big man in order to win a championship.
Oh yeah, no.
Your best player.
It was a big man's league before, 2015, really.
Yeah, but like before that stage came, it was your best player needs to be a big man, or else you don't have a shot. And I'd say,
just go back through it. Excluding those LeBron Heat teams, and even then, LeBron's not really a small player.
No.
But like you look at it, and the Lakers had it was Kobe.
But
then they also had Pau.
Yeah, Pau Gasol, one of the most dominant big men of that era. You took a look at
the Celtics had KG.
You take a look at Dallas, who had Dirk Nowitzki.
Dallas had Dirk.
The Spurs had Tim Duncan, and for
Tim Duncan. Dallas also had Tyson Chandler that year too.
Yeah, Tyson Chandler was big for that run too, and the Pistons that won that championship.
Pistons had Ben Wallace and Rasheed Wallace.
You got the Wallace brothers. And
Shaq on the 01 Lakers, that 3P team.
Right, exactly. It
wasn't. You can just keep going. I mean, we can go all the way back to Bill Russell and Will Chamberlain.
Yeah, even if you want to go into the 80s, you got the 80s. You got Kareem, you got Kevin McHale, and you got Moses Malone that won a championship in Philly too.
Yeah, Celtics also had Parrish too on those teams.
Exactly, and Robert Parrish is another Hall of Famer. And then
Granted, neither of those two guys were the best player on the Celtics teams is Larry Bird.
no, because Larry Bird is Larry Bird, one of the most
Yeah.
underappreciated guys in the history of the NBA.
Larry Bird gets disrespected, and I don't understand why. I don't get it.
He's a white player in the Boston Celtics.
That's so true, but I mean, like, I believe now. You can fact check me, but I believe he's the last person to win 3 straight MVPs.
I'll check. I will look it
I
up.
believe that to be true.
I think you're right, but I'll look it up for you. NBA.
Yeah, definitely do that. But I believe that to be true. He's the last player in NBA history to win 3 straight MVPs. And if we're being completely honest, he was very close to winning 5 straight because the 2 years before he lost, he came in second place.
I mean, if I believe you are right. Larry Bird won 3. I think these are the list of people that have won. Johnson won 3 in 4 years. Jordan.
Yeah, there's been a bunch that have won, like 3 and 4, 2 and 3, back to backs, that kind of stuff.
Tim Duncan won 2. Tim Duncan went back to back. Nash went back to back. LeBron went back to back twice. LeBron almost won 5 in a row, but Derrick Rose interrupted that run, and then Curry went back to back. So yeah, he's the last player.
Yeah, he's the last player to win 3 straight, and it very easily could have been 5. He lost to I know it was Moses Malone 1 year, and I forget who he lost to the other year.
I think most of the Malone went back to back, so it could have very well just been him twice.
It might have been I think you're right. It might have been him both years. But yeah, no, he came in second. The 2 years prior to winning 3 straight. So like, I just don't understand the disrespect for Larry Bird.
Another one
he's got 3 rings.
Another one that gets disrespected. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar won 5 in 7 years.
Yeah,
he could have won 7 in a row. Bob McAdoo and Dave Cowens were the only ones that stopped him. He almost won 7. But there's only other. That's the thing. There's only 2 other players in league history that have actually three-peated when it comes to MVPs. It's Bird, Wilt Chamberlain, and Bill Russell, and that's it. Those are the only players that have three-peated.
Super exclusive list.
Super exclusive.
And I mean, you look at Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. Like, those are probably 2 of the top 10 players that ever play.
And I think right now, it's funny because it's sitting in current day, we're watching someone who could very well break that like this next year. Because I'm assuming Giannis is going to win the MVP again this year, but he could easily very well win it again next year. I think he should too.
Because I mean, the only argument I've seen for LeBron is he's 35.
Yeah, like
so
that doesn't.
That
doesn't mean
anything.
Like, cool.
He's a better passer. All right, that's true, but like,
cool.
That's it.
Who's got the better record right now?
That's the only thing he's doing better than Giannis right now. And shooting, but like, Giannis isn't a shooter.
Yeah, and if you want to throw like, oh, LeBron's team didn't even make the playoffs last year. Now his team's in the playoffs. We're not gonna forget what happened with LeBron on that team last year.
As a unibrow, wears number 3.
And
showed up.
We're not gonna forget what happened to that Lakers team last year in the months of February and March. Granted, LeBron did get hurt and was out for 2 weeks, but we're not gonna forget what happened to that Lakers team. How they just collapsed and fell off a cliff and just basically gave up. But yeah, when it comes to like back to what we were saying, like the original post play, like it's basically that era. It was starting to fade out, I think, in the 2000s, where you had like your offenses were starting to become a little bit more high tempo. Like you had your Phoenix Suns, your 7 seconds or less offense with Steve Nash, who were there. You had your We Believe Warriors that were more of an offensive juggernaut. You had the Atlanta Hawks led by guys like Joe Johnson and Josh Smith, who led the league in scoring a couple of times, or were at least up there in scoring. It's all those. They kind of helped mold into what it is today, and now it's once Steve Kerr came along, he's like, oh, by the way, Steph Curry, just shoot threes, just take a lot of threes, and we'll be fine. But I mean, it worked. But
I mean, you get a couple of guys come along, and he just built the Golden State. What they did is they built a team just such a different way than anybody really had for the last 10 to 20 years from them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, they took their 2 guards and they built it around them.
Yeah, and then they were able to add that third monster to that in Kevin Durant.
And it's kind of taking. I mean, look at how other teams are doing it now. They're building around wings and guards as opposed to centers.
Right. If you have a center, it's great, but your center's got to be able to shoot though too.
Yeah, I mean, teams, it used to be, let's, start at the basket and build out. Now it's like, all right, well, let's start at the three-point line and build in.
And it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next 10 years, too. Is it going to just be a continuation of this, or is another team going to find a mold that's going to be different from what we've seen in the past, and then all of a sudden just, take over the league just like the Warriors did? Because that's the thing we've seen.
It's interesting.
It's something it's something different every decade. It feels like.
I think you're also seeing kind of something that I think, and this, again, this is probably just like a Celtics bias, but I think, with what the Celtics they have in Robert Williams, I think is another one of those things that could maybe kind of change the way we look at different positions. Whereas
seed time,
he's not going to shoot. He's not a perimeter player. He's not a ball handler, but he can pass.
And he's athletic.
He's already one of the better passing big men in the league. He just doesn't play a lot.
Or at all. I honestly don't remember him seeing.
He can pass like nobody's business out of pick and roll. So, you have a guy like him who he can rim run. He's crazy athletic. He's just not going to shoot.
Right.
But he has all the other traits that you want in a modern big.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, players in that mold are going to kind of swing it back to what it was, early 2000s.
If you want a player that gets more usage time, and he kind of like in comparison to a Robert Williams, kind of look at Nikola Jokic. He's the prototype for passing big men.
Oh, he's the best one in the league. It's not even close.
Yeah, he's a prototype. I mean, he obviously the athleticism between him and Robert Williams is two completely different sides, but when you're talking about like passing big men like that, there's no one else that does it better than Jokic, and he's transforming. He's transforming that because now before it was your playmaker's your point guard, and now it's like, well, your playmaker can also be your center, or it could be your power forward. Like Giannis is the Milwaukee Bucks' ideal playmaker. He's your power forward, but he's still also your ideal playmaker. Granted, Eric Bledsoe.
No, 100%.
Granted, Eric Bledsoe can also do it as well, but Giannis is your guy. It's Giannis. He's like 7 feet tall, and he's big. He's a big guy.
Very long.
Very long. Very athletic.
Very long arms.
Very long name. He's just very.
His arms are almost as long as his name.
Pretty much. I'm surprised. Like
it's crazy though. I mean, the guy can basically reach up from the free throw line and dunk.
Yeah, he is the Space Jam come to life. Like the Michael Jordan in Space Jam, it's that come to life. Yeah, he's absurd. So to wrap things off, I got one more thing we can quickly discuss. Reports were saying that in 1999, obviously, like we said, before we were both even alive on the planet, that the 76ers and the Raptors almost swung a trade to bring Trace McGrady from Toronto to the 76ers to play alongside Allen Iverson. So that's one of the things where it's interesting that it gets brought up, because where would the NBA be with that move done? Do you think? Because I can see maybe the Sixers winning at least one ring with both of them, just because of simply how good Trace McGrady was on those like Orlando teams. Obviously, he wouldn't be scoring as many points, but those two firepowers next to each other would be.
You put T-Mac and AI on the same team.
Like that's interesting.
They win one.
At least, I think.
I'll give them one, of course. Like right off the bat.
I feel like
with chances for one or two more.
Especially if you still got a guy like Dikembe Mutombo there, too.
Yeah, for sure.
That's another thing that's kind of cool about what's been happening lately is with all these interviews that have been coming out, we've been able to hear like how a lot of players end up in extremely different situations. Take the Jason Tatum one, for example. Very close to becoming very close to becoming a Phoenix Sun until the owner decided that he was a nincompoop and canceled the rest of the workout.
What about the one ML Carr came out and said that he tried to get Michael Jordan to come out of retirement and play for the Celtics in '94. Which would have been nuts.
That would have been nuts, but also, who else did the Celtics have on that roster besides Reggie Lewis? Because Bird wasn't there anymore.
It was the season they got Dominique.
Oh God.
So they had Reggie Lewis on the team. They also had Dominique Wilkins.
They could have got Dominique Wilkins a championship, man.
And it was Dominique Wilkins was definitely on the back nine, but he dropped like 20 a game.
Yeah, he was still productive. He's still a productive.
He was
player.
still good. Like he wasn't the human highlight reel anymore, but he still put up 20 a game.
Yeah, there was another one. I forget which one came out.
But that was
recently.
By far my least favorite. Was that Michael Jordan one? I was like, you kidding me?
You're telling me the Celtics could have had two even more?
Yeah, Jerry Krause told him no. ML Carr was like, can we talk to Michael? And Jerry Krause was like, no.
Yeah, basically. He's like, yeah.
Which is the smart thing to do.
Yeah, it's obviously a smart thing to do. And then another one that's come back in the limelight is the Scottie Pippen to the Supersonics with this whole thing. With the Last Dance saying that he could have got a trade for Sean Kemp, which would have been extremely interesting That would have been one
that
because
would put Jordan and Kemp on the same team.
like that's and
That would
and
have been pretty electric.
while we're on the same topic of Tracy McGrady, there was also the one where Scottie almost got traded for T-Mac too. Scottie to Toronto, which could have
to Chicago.
And that one's a really interesting one because if you do that,
After Michael left.
No, that was the season before. That would have been before. If that happened, we wouldn't have even had a Last Dance documentary to begin with because Michael Jordan would have refused to play with Tracy McGrady. Because I think that was his thing. He didn't want to play with Tracy McGrady, but he wanted to obviously play with Scottie and win a ring, which they did. But it's interesting because if you trade for him, you're the Bulls. You're not in mediocrity for the next 10 years afterwards. Because they really sucked for the next 10 years, basically, until they got Derrick Rose. And then they became pretty good again. And then if you're Toronto, you get Scottie Pippen, chances are you might not ever get Vince Carter because Scottie Pippen's going to lead your team to more success.
That's true.
Which means, it's got a whole, that's a thing that's cool.
Although they might even get Vince anyway.
Maybe.
The chances are a little less because that was a draft night trade.
Yeah, there was a draft that because they traded. They originally wasn't it originally they drafted Antoine Jameson?
State was the one that picked Vince Carter.
Yeah, then they traded him for.
I'm trying to think who Toronto took.
It was Antoine Jameson. Yeah, it was Antoine Jameson.
Right.
So I think they just swapped.
Yeah,
each other.
they pretty much swapped things before and made them for each other.
Right. And another one I completely forgot about. There was a big one was the Paul George to Cleveland one. A couple of years ago.
I didn't hear about that one.
It was a 3-team trade between the Pacers, the Suns, and the Cavaliers, where the Suns were going to get Kyrie Irving. Oh wait, no. Well, there were two different scenarios. There was one that was involving the Suns, and there was one involving the Nuggets, where the Suns would be getting Kyrie Irving, and the Cavaliers would be getting Eric Bledsoe and Paul George, and then I think the Pacers just got like a whole bunch of assets back from both those teams and whatnot. I think Josh Jackson was probably part of that deal too. And the Suns nixed a deal because they wanted to keep Josh Jackson because, like I mentioned before, nincompoops. And with I think it was the same thing with the Nuggets, where the Nuggets would have given up. I think it was Gary Harris for Kyrie Irving, essentially.
Oh, that's worth it.
Oh well, seeing how Gary Harris's career turned out, where I don't even know if he's like a fringe starter on that team now, but. He was also at that time one of the more. I think that he was just about to get his bag and he was starting to break out a little bit. Obviously, the Nuggets probably would have had to give up a little bit more at the time too, but you get what I mean. Nuggets get Kyrie Irving. The Pacers, not the Pacers. The Cavs get Gary Harris and Paul George, and then Pacers get a bunch of assets back. Obviously worked out best for the Pacers because they end up getting Oladipo and Sabonis, but. It's always cool to see what would actually happen in those scenarios and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a ton of them. I mean, just like one more quick one before we wrap up is, what if Rick Pitino didn't suck? the Celtics would still have Chauncey Billups.
Yeah, that's true. But that's a weird thing about Billups is like Billups didn't really come into his own for like until he really made it to the Pistons. That's when he kind of came into his own because
he was a late bloomer.
He bounced around.
The Celtics gave up on him after like 2 months.
That's true. Not even. It was like, wasn't it like 4 games? Wasn't it like, didn't they trade him like 5 games into his rookie year or something like that?
They traded him so quick.
Yeah.
Into his first season. I mean, he was in and out.
Yeah, you could.
But they could have had him, Al Jefferson, and ISO Joe on the same team.
Paul Pierce.
With Paul Pierce.
That's by saying
now,
that.
Does that change things? Maybe they don't feel, maybe they're good enough to the point where they don't feel they need to make those moves in 07. I don't know.
Right. That could change that. But if you keep all those guys together, there's a chance you get a championship even before that because you also got Antoine Walker too.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you had Antoine on those teams, and that team is now better than the 04 Pistons.
That's true.
Without Chauncey Billups.
Yeah, because if you put say if you got a starting lineup like Chauncey Billups, we'll put 2004 2005 together. You got a team of Chauncey Billups, Joe Johnson, who's starting to come up at that time, Paul Pierce. Al Jefferson's not even in the league yet, actually, but we'll just say you got another center that's like somewhat similar to that skill set. And then Antoine Walker, who's starting to decline, but still pretty good. That team's very good because Paul Pierce is in the middle of his prime.
Right.
That's
And
right
Paul
up there.
Pierce, and as much as we, people want to make fun of him, Paul Pierce, the announcer, Paul Pierce in his prime was disgusting.
Paul Pierce. Did you watch the Game of Zones or no?
No, I didn't.
Paul Pierce is actually the headmaster of the Game of Zones. It was it was the funniest. It was the funniest way to wrap that
I'll
up.
have to check it out.
It was the last episode is the funniest one. But when you say that one, just two quick ones pop in my mind is what if the Knicks never hire Isaiah Thomas, just completely screw up their franchise for another 5 or so years, and what if when we mentioned Joe Johnson, what if the Suns don't let Joe Johnson walk in, I think it was like 05 or 06. I think the Suns easily win. The Suns would be right up there with the Celtics in 07 if they kept Joe Johnson. Because of how good ISO Joe was. And they could have beaten those Spurs. They could have had a chance to beat that Spurs team in 2006 with all slamming Steve Nash into the scores table aside.
Yeah.
But that's the sad part is, you're never gonna know. And unfortunately we're still stuck with 0 championships, but it's okay. It's okay.
Chauncey Billups played 51 games for the Celtics in his rookie year.
So he must have gotten traded at the deadline then, huh?
Yeah, he's a deadline trade. Started 44 games, played in 51.
What?
Averaged 11 points a game.
That's not bad as a rookie.
He's okay, he's fine.
Probably.
Johnson played, what did he play? 48 for the Celtics. 33 starts.
Who did they even trade for him? Who did they even trade for him?
Well, they traded him to Phoenix.
Right, but who did the Suns give up?
Well, I'll tell you.
Let's find out. The Joe Johnson Celtics trade. Here it is. Oh, you gave Tony Delk and Rodney Rogers.
Rose.
Tony Delk was all right. Tony Delk was a decent player. Not Joe Johnson, but sheesh. Yeah, that's a bad look. Yeah, that wasn't. Was that Rick Pitino though? That wasn't Rick Pitino. That was after that.
That was after Pitino.
Yeah, because I was gonna say that's
I think Pitino was Johnson.
Yeah, Pitino was like late 1990s. Like he had that.
Pitino was Billups. That was Rick Pitino.
That was his reign.
He was already way out of town.
That was his reign of terror. Oh.
He was in and out.
Yeah. That's the Celtics had their ineptitude 20 years ago. Now they're fine. Now they have.
Larry Bird's not walking through that door.
Larry Bird's not walking through that door anytime soon.
I hope you're walking out that door.
Larry Bird's not walking through that door, and Joe Johnson's walking right out of it. So is Chauncey Billups. See you guys later. Ciao. But
the only person who's moving through that door is Chauncey Billups, and it's out.
Yeah, basically, and bringing in some scrub in return, some Slava Medvedenko. But that's gonna wrap it up for us. We covered a pretty good amount of topics today. As always, go check out both of our stuff over at Tailgate Sports, Hot Streak Sports as well. Leave the link both down to those in the description as well. Thank you for tuning in as always, and until next time, we'll see y'all later.